he replied. But you're quite right. I have chosen my own life. All I can say is, watch over Sybil. Don't let her come to any harm. Mother, you must watch over her. James, you really talk very strangely. Of course I watch over Sybil. I hear a gentleman comes every night to the theater and goes behind to talk to her. Is that right? What about that? You are speaking about things you don't understand, James. In the profession, we are accustomed to receive a great deal of most gratifying attention. I myself used to receive many bouquets at one time. That was when acting was really understood. As for Sybil, I do not know at present whether her attachment is serious or not. But there is no doubt that the young man in question is a perfect gentleman. He is always most polite to me. Besides, he has the appearance of being rich, and the flowers he sends are lovely. You don't know his name, though, said the lad harshly. No, answered his mother with a placid expression on her face. He has not yet revealed his real name. I think it is quite romantic of him. He is probably a member of the aristocracy. James Bain bit his lip. Watch over Sybil, mother, he cried. Watch over her. My son, you distress me very much. Sybil is always under my special care. Of course, if this gentleman is wealthy, there is no reason why he should not contract an alliance with him. I trust he is one of the aristocracy. He has all the appearance of it, I must say. It might be a most brilliant marriage for Sybil. They would make a charming couple. His good looks are really quite remarkable. Everybody notices them. Pause. So they're well matched in terms of looks, but they're not matched at all in terms of class. Sybil is a much lower class than Dorian, and the gold-digging mother here is convinced that maybe the reason he hasn't told the name is because he's a member of the aristocracy, related to the king and queen, and that Sybil is somehow going to, elevate to the top of the class based solely on her physical appearance. The lad muttered something to himself and drummed on the window pane with coarse fingers. He had just turned round to say something when the door opened and Sybil ran in. How serious you both are, she cried. What is the matter? Nothing, he answered. I suppose one must be serious sometimes. Goodbye, mother. I will have my dinner at 5 o'clock. Everything is packed except my shirt, so you need not trouble. He's kind of demanding, right? Have my dinner ready at 5 o'clock, okay. Goodbye, my son, she answered, with a bow of strained stateliness. She was extremely annoyed at the tone he had adopted with her. Me too. And there was something in his look that had made her feel afraid. Kiss me, mother, said the girl. Her flower-like lips touched the withered cheek and warmed its frost. Now, that's obviously figurative language. There's no frost on the old lady's cheek. But frost is a symbol of age, and it connects, so, Wilde's being poetic. And it's good to notice these things because they help you when you're actually reading a poem or something. My child, cried Miss Vane, looking up to the ceiling in search of an imaginary gallery. Come, Sybil, said her brother impatiently. He hated his mother's affectations. They went out in the flickering wind-blown sunlight and strolled down dreary Euston Road. The passers-by glanced in wonder at the sullen, heavy youth who, in coarse, ill-fitting clothes, was in the company of such a graceful, refined-looking girl. He was like a common gardener walking with a rose. Again, that's a metaphor. Or I guess it's a simile, technically, we had like. Jim frowned from time to time when he caught the inquisitive glances of some stranger. He had that dislike of being stared at, which comes on geniuses late in life and never leaves the commonplace. Sybil, however, was quite unconscious of the effect she was producing. Her love was trembling in laughter on her lips. She was thinking of Prince Charming, and that she might think of him all the more, she did not talk of him, but prattled on about the ship in which James was going to sail, about the gold he was certain to find, about the wonderful heiress whose life he was to save from the wicked red-shirted bushrangers. For he was not to remain a sailor or a supercargo or whatever he was going to be. Oh no, a sailor's existence was dreadful. Fancy being cooped up in a horrid ship, with the hoarse humpbacked waves trying to get in, and a black wind blowing the mast down and tearing the sails to long, screaming ribbons. He was to leave the vessel at Melbourne, bid a polite goodbye to the captain, go off at once to the goldfields. Before a week was over, he was to come across a large nugget of pure gold, the largest nugget that had ever been discovered, and bring it down to the coast in a wagon guarded by 6 mounted policemen. The bushrangers were to attack them 3 times and be defeated with immense slaughter. Wait. This gives you an idea of Sybil's imagination. She's creating a story for James's life, right? He's going to go to Australia, he's going to find this giant nugget, they're going to get attacked by bushrangers. And he's going to, meet an heiress. Or no! He was not going to the goldfields at all. They were horrid places where men got intoxicated and shot each other in bar rooms and used bad language. As if they don't own a ship. He was to be a nice sheep farmer, and one evening as he was riding home, he was to see the beautiful heiress being carried off by a robber on a black horse and give chase and rescue her. Of course she would fall in love with him, and he with her, and they would get married and come home and live in an immense house in London. Yes, there were delightful things in store for him, but he must be very good and not lose his temper or spend his money foolishly. She was only a year older than he was, but she knew so much more of life. I mean, obviously he knows more about life, right? Like, she's living in this dream world. He's going to meet an heiress. He's going to be a sheep farmer, and he's going to be riding home. Not on a sheep, but that'd be kind of funny. And he's gonna save her from some evil guy on a black horse, and they're gonna get married, and he's gonna come back. I mean, look at the story. The story is like a play, and that's how Sybil views life. She's so innocent. The only experience that she's had has been through art, and so she thinks life is art, and that's interesting because that's gonna come into play later. And Dorian, I think, has a similar viewpoint right now. He does think of life as art. And we'll see that as the story goes on as well. So there's a definite similarity. These two characters are very much alike in physical beauty, in sort of headspace, except that Dorian has been influenced by Lord Henry and Sybil has not, and that Dorian comes from a much higher social class than Sybil Vane. But honestly, like, she's kind of crazy. Yes, there were delightful things in store for him, but he must be very good and not lose his temper or spend his money foolishly. She was only a year older than he was, but she knew so much more of life. He must be sure also to write to her by every mail and to say his prayers each night before he went to sleep. God was very good and would watch over him. She would pray for him too, and in a few years he would come back quite rich and happy. The lad listened sulkily to her and made no answer. He was heartsick at leaving home. Yet it was not this alone that made him gloomy and morose. Inexperienced though he was, he had still a strong sense of the danger of Sybil's position. This young dandy who was making love to her could mean her no good. He was a gentleman, and he hated him for that. Hated him through a curious race instinct for which he could not account, and which, for that reason, was all the more dominant in him. That goes right back to Lord Henry's idea of psychology, that the things that we don't understand about ourselves are the things that are dominant over us. James Vane hates the rich and the wealthy with some sort of a race instinct. I think that's an interesting phrase. He was conscious also of the shallowness and vanity of his mother's nature, and in that he saw infinite peril for Sybil and Sybil's happiness. Children begin by loving their parents. As they grow older, they judge them. Sometimes they forgive them. I love how Oscar Wilde just slips that aphorism in there as a narrator. I mean, listen to this thing. Children begin by loving their parents. As they grow older, they judge them. Sometimes they forgive them. That's heavy stuff. I mean, if you're young, you're probably not through that phase yet. But as you get older, Oscar Wilde's kind of on point. He's on point a lot. Anyway. His mother, he had something on his mind to ask of her, something that he had brooded on for many months of silence. A chance phrase that he had heard in the theater, a whispered sneer that had reached his ears one night as he waited at the stage door and set loose a train of horrible thoughts. He remembered it as if it had been the lash of a hunting crop across his face. That's a simile. His brows knit together into a wedge-like furrow, and with a twitch of pain, he bit his underlip. So we got some backstory on James Vane here. He's heard something about his parentage, about his mother, that he needs to know the answer to. It's a little Oedipus-like here, like when Oedipus heard a rumor about his own life. Anyway, "You are not listening to a word I am saying, Jim," cried Sybil, "and I am making the most delightful plans for your future. Do say something." "What do you want me to say?" "Oh, that you will be a good boy and not forget us," she answered, smiling at him. He shrugged his shoulders. "You're more likely to forget me than I am to forget you, Sybil." She flushed. "What do you mean, Jim?" she asked. "You have a new friend, I hear. Who is he? Why have you not told me about him?" "He means you no good." "Stop, Jim," she exclaimed. "You must not say anything about him. I love him." Why? You don't even know his name," answered the lad. "Who is he? I have a right to know." "He is called Prince Charming. Don't you like the name? Oh, you silly boy, you should never forget it. If you only saw him, you would think him the most wonderful person in the world. Someday you will meet him. When you come back from Australia, you will like him so much. Everybody likes him. And I love him. I wish you could come to the theater tonight. He is going to be there, and I'm going to play Juliet. Oh, how I shall play it. Fancy, Jim, to be in love and play Juliet, to have him sitting there, to play for his delight. I'm afraid I may frighten the company, frighten or enthrall them. To be in love is to surpass one's self. Poor dreadful Mr. Isaacs will be shouting "Genius!" to his loafers at the bar. He has preached me as a dogma. Tonight he will announce me as a revelation. I feel it, and it is all his only, Prince Charming, my wonderful lover, my God of graces. Jeez. But I am poor beside him. Poor? What does that matter? When poverty creeps in at the door, love flies in through the window. Our proverbs want rewriting. They were made in winter, and it is summer now, springtime for me. I think a very dance of blossoms and blue skies. He's a gentleman, said the lad sullenly. A prince, she cried musically. What more do you want? He wants to enslave you. I shudder at the thought of being free. I want you to beware of him. To see him is to worship him. To know him is to trust him. Sybil, you are mad about him. She laughed and took his arm. You dear old Jim, you talk as if you were 100. Some day you will be in love yourself, then you will know what it is. Don't look so sulky. Surely you should be glad to think that, though you are going away, you leave me happier than I have ever been before. Life has been hard for us both, terribly hard and difficult, but it will be different now. You are going to a new world, and I have found one. Here are 2 chairs. Let us sit down and see the smart people go by. Pause. That's a little ironic, right? Smart people. Smart in this case means well-dressed. But, compared to Sybil, everybody's smart. Sort of a little ironic commentary. I think that Oscar Wilde slipped in there to give you a double meaning. They took seats amid the crowd of watchers. The tulip bed across the road flamed like throbbing rings of fire. More fire imagery. It just keeps coming back. A white dust, tremulous cloud of orris root, it seemed, hung in the panting air. The brightly colored parasols, those are umbrellas, danced and dipped like monstrous butterflies. Lots of figurative language here. It reminds me of a Rembrandt picture, like painting. All the women with parasols and their fancy dresses in the park. She made her brother talk of himself, his hopes, his prospects. He spoke slowly and with effort. They passed words to each other as players at a game pass counters. Sybil felt oppressed. She could not communicate her joy. A faint smile curving that sullen mouth was all the echo she could win. After some time she became silent. Suddenly she caught a glimpse of golden hair and laughing lips, and in an open carriage with 2 ladies, Dorian Gray drove past. She started to her feet. "There he is!" she cried. "Who?" said James Vane. "Prince Charming," she answered, looking after the Victoria. That's a low carriage with 2 seats, named for the Victorian age and Queen Victoria herself. He jumped up and seized her roughly by the arm. "Show him to me. Which is he? Point him out. I must see him," he exclaimed. But at that moment the Duke of Berwick's 4-in-hand came between, and when it had left the space clear, the carriage had swept out of the park. It's kind of like Dorian Gray's driving by in a convertible, and when James stands up to look at him, like a bus gets between them, and by the time the bus is gone, the convertible's gone, and he can't see him anymore. Like that's the image that we've sort of got going on here. "He is gone," murmured Sybil sadly. "I wish you had seen him." "I wish I had, for as sure as there is a God in heaven, if he ever does you any wrong, I shall kill him." Pause. That's a bold statement. Is this foreshadowing? James Vane just made a vow that if Dorian ever does Sybil any wrong, he's going to kill him? I think it is. I think anybody who's reading this book, you're like, whoa, okay, I see what's going on here. She looked at him in horror. He repeated his words. They cut the air like a dagger. The people around began to gape. A lady standing close to her tittered. Wonder if it's Lord Henry's wife. "Come away, Jim, come away," she whispered. He followed her doggedly as she passed through the crowd. He felt glad at what he had said. When they reached the Achilles statue, she turned round. There was pity in her eyes. It became laughter on her lips. She shook her head at him. "You are foolish, James, utterly foolish. A bad-tempered boy, that is all. How can you say such horrible things? You don't know what you're talking about. You are simply jealous and unkind. Ah, I wish you would fall in love. Love makes people good, and what you said was wicked." "I am 16, he answered, "and I know what I am about. Mother is no help to you. She doesn't understand how to look after you. I wish now that I wasn't going to Australia at all. I have a great mind to chuck the whole thing up. I would if my articles hadn't been signed." "Oh, don't be so serious, Jim. You are like one of the heroes of those silly melodramas Mother used to be fond of acting.